Oh my God. Thank you. Okay, go. Ridiculously prolific.
Yeah, last year I've been like really ridiculously prolific. It all started when I was working in Dreamworld over Christmas 2019, which is like an immersive.
What's Dreamworld?
It's like an immersive art experience that was set up by a big arts collective where the audience members would go through this space and each room was dedicated to a different thing and they interacted with the performers and stuff like this. And I got roped in last minute to read poetry in the wet dream room, which my friend Adam was doing. And it was really awesome. It was really overwhelming. It was really challenging because like I got roped into this huge big project once it was up and running. And even though I knew I was definitely qualified to be there, and that's why my friend Adam had asked me to be there, I just like had so much like imposter syndrome and so much like stuff coming up. And I was having a lot of issues with my family at the time, just really needing some distance from them, just to unpack like my own trans identity and understand what that meant. And basically I was reading from my mobile phone, doing these readings. And I just had a Google file open in the background where I would note anything in. And I was taking a lot of drugs. I was taking a lot of ketamine at the time. And that started on like the 17th of December. And on the 1st of January, 2020, just had like a really wonderful night with my partner. We partied at Dreamworld and then partied together at home. And she was sleeping and I picked up my phone and thought, I wonder what I've been writing. And realized I'd written a 76-page conceptual book that knew about itself and was discussing itself and what it meant for how it worked. Yeah, like, and so I spent January kind of putting this book together.
Okay, yeah, so it'll show when you're behind it. So if you're immediately behind it, then we'll be able to see it. Nice.
So I won't show it all, but I'll just kind of give a, so it kind of starts here. It's like it's a libretto, like a concertina book.
Oh.
But it kind of folds out randomly.
Yes.
Gonna have to edit that.
Maybe we just leave it in.
Yeah. But like it starts suddenly to fold out in different directions.
I see. What? Oh my God, amazing.
And it's a labyrinth and it will literally tell you suddenly that you have to, Sam, I'm going to have to cancel this mouth noise thing because it's going to,
cancel it.
It will affect.
Yeah.
Affecting that. So, how do I turn that off again?
So it's the stop video, little arrow video settings, and then you go background and filters, and you can just put none.
Video setting, background and filters. Yeah, I'm going to do that because it's
great. Better. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. So basically, it kind of folds out in different directions. It tells you that it's called Dreamworld, a Liberello.
Yes.
And that I was just really playing around with language in ways because I realized that like I was finding it really difficult to assert myself and actually make statements I could linguistically completely stand behind with all of the connotations. I was just getting very playful. And so like this first poem, like, there's kind of a mix of, there's 6 distinctly different aspects of poetry that I was writing. There's love poetry, there's meditations on language, there's family issues, and a couple of others, and they're all color coordinated on the backs of the paper. And so like the first poem, for example, says here, you can see that. I keep asking the world to show me something holy. Though I know it won't, I do like to get my hopes up. From time to time, I know the peace it brings to tell my lover, her existence eases mine. from inside her, outside her.
Oh.
So yeah, like just really kind of playing with language in this kind of way. And then I found myself not being able to make concrete assertions. So instead of saying, if not this, then what, do I actually want to say, what if not this? And then I leave it to the reader to kind of decide. So it becomes this kind of very much like coding. And then already, page 7, it's asking itself if it's a square booklet. And I don't remember doing any of this at all. And there's blank pages that are inserted. And then I kind of, yeah, got really into like how to visually present poetry, which I'd never really done before. So this one says, I dove off the cliff of myself to save myself from the cliff I dove off.
Oh. Yeah.
And obviously the I is jumping off the cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been writing loads of haiku, loads of really dense haiku, but this is where it all kind of started. So this is another visual poem, but also a haiku. But it says, car crashed over cliff, into water I escaped. My first breath was you.
Very cool.
But then we changed direction and we didn't want to be created, yet were created wanting. I am allowed to want. I'm allowed to be here. I know. I mean, I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I had always known. And the voice of that self gets smaller and smaller as I realized that like, yeah, just how little that statement meant for me when I needed it, but now I can actually say it. And then we go from going in this direction, and then the book tells us to turn in a counterclockwise, and then we carry on reading again. I'm not going to go into the whole thing because it's a 76-page book.
Oh, wow.
But there's a couple of nice bits that I'd like to show you. So this one says, I am captain of my own ship wreck, mistress of my own ring. Ring, 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 wrong. Yeah. The whole thing was quite bizarre. And so this is kind of what I was really had my head into for January. And into February. And into February, I started to have other ideas about how to play with how to make words sit on a page. And essentially when lockdown 1 happened, a lot of things kind of colluded that meant that that my partner cohabited with me, my 2 best friends, and my housemate, which was actually wonderful, but lots of us all together in lockdown was also quite intense. But essentially I fractaled into making the 2nd book or 3rd book in the series, but and literally spent about 300-400 hours in the first 4 or 5 weeks of lockdown making this book, which is called Pretty Fucking Magic. # real world failure. And then we have this where we're told to fold this back over the title page. And when we do, we have the first poem, which says, "We're pretty, we're fucking, and we're magic." Yeah.
I saw it when you posted it on Instagram. So yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, there's a couple of these about, like, so this is the first kinetic poem in the series, where it says, "Party hard, create harder, heal hardest." And it says, "Healing is hardest."
Oh, wow.
And so, like, yeah, I just essentially been processing loads of things just through poetry and through this, like I've started to call them book-shaped kinetic poetry sculptures.
Very nice, because we were wondering what to call them ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm kind of referring to them as art objects or art.
Yeah.
But
Like definitely like book-shaped poetry sculptures and occasionally book-shaped kinetic poetry sculptures.
Very nice.
So, like, here is a haiku again. There's, "When I need to be close to you, I ask how far I am from myself." And to be able to get the answer, the I keeps moving further and further away from myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this book really goes places. I'm going to kind of skim through it, but here's a diptychon where we have a haiku on this side that says, "Fear is fright or flight." Sorry. "Fear is fight or flight, freeze or fawn, forever in amygdalic time." And then the diptychon part is this, where it says, "Relief is," I don't know if you recognize this shape here.
Oh my God, it's like a pregnancy test.
It's a negative pregnancy test.
Yeah, only those of us who've had like sexual intercourse with those with penises.
Yes.
Understand that, but I'm one of them.
Yeah, right. But yeah, this is a really important one, like, which I kind of, yeah, this is a really important poem for me. This is essentially the declaration of love for my partner. So it says, "I love who you are, how you are, when you are, where you are, why you are you." Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's maybe like 40 poems in this book, but I'm going to move through a couple of them a little quicker. I think this one, let's see. Okay, yeah. This was the first one that I designed like this. And this is actually a conversation I had with a friend. "Why did you move to Berlin? It was a crazy love story until it was just a crazy story. Not a love story, not love, not a story, just crazy." Yeah.
I think that's a lot of people's story when they move to Berlin, actually.
Yeah, right.
Highly applicable, yes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that. I mean, the reason I came was because I was in love, or at least yeah, I mean, I was as in love as I thought I could be when I was 24 years old and still thought I was a boy, you know?
Can I ask you, Moon, these sculptures are just astonishing, and I know that we haven't seen all of them, or you know, I mean, yeah, there's some amazing variations. Do you have like, so much is happening online now, so much is digital, and including experimental poetry, like there's a lot of people writing poems as websites or writing poems as Wikipedia pages even. They also play around with absence with the kind of a blacking out of text, or the whiting out, or the highlighting of text, you know, vis-a-vis text, and also that repetition as well, and the fact that you have to do some kind of movement in order to reveal the poem to you. It doesn't just sit there in front of you on a page, or so it's in that way it's more like a performance, in the sense that
this is something that that I actually realized in the photography work that I used to do, because I used to do a lot of conceptual photography work. Like, for example, I did a piece which was based on the kind of up-to-date theory of how memory is physically stored in the brain. And essentially, I took 4 photographs of places where I have a specific strong memory towards them, but the place itself has fundamentally changed into something new. And so I did long exposure photographs of these 4 places, from Berlin, from Manchester, and from North Wales. And when I printed them, it's all black and white, all traditional analog black and white. And essentially, when I printed them, I interrupted the chemical process before fixing them, which meant that the black was developed, you could see it. There was no more developer left in the page, but normally the fixing salts that you use, they remove any of the light sensitive silver ions from the page. But I didn't do that, and instead I stored them in light sealed boxes. And so every time you open up a box to view them, it receives light and continues to darken. And I use that as a metaphor for the fact that, like, it's the same theory that the eternal sunshine upon the spotless mind is based upon, because we used to think, or we're accustomed to thinking of our memory systems as working like filing, like storage, where you go to the file, you pull it out, you read it, and then you put it back in. But that's not what actually happens with memory. Memory, a long-term memory, is literally turned into the same chemical state as re-experiencing it now, so that you experience it, but it is now in a chemically unstable state, and therefore can be affected by the framework in which you remember it. And when you stop remembering it, it gets saved again. So it means that the purest memories that we have are the ones that we haven't yet remembered. And the more we remember a memory, the more abstract it is, because each new saving is a facsimile of the original, but it's a facsimile of a facsimile of a facsimile of a facsimile, and is imbued with all of these things. So, like, the first time I exhibited that at the Wiesbadener Fototage, there was a window on one side of the room and the table was here. And you can actually see on the photographs now that there is a shadow cast from the window, where you can work out literally where the 4 boxes were positioned in relation to the window, because of where they have this shadow, which is lighter than the rest because it hasn't received as much light. And yeah, I had a really great discussion with a friend about that, and he let me know that actually this is performance art, like, it's performance art without a performer, because the audience or the reader they have to perform the art in lieu of me not being there, but it's still performance. And that's what I kind of really realized, like, there's something very cinematic about this book. And it's all to do with the fact that I control the timing. So by virtue of not having all of the words revealed at once, there is timing, which means there is a time that is set to the poem. It doesn't matter how quickly somebody can read, they still only get them in the same increments. Yeah, and like all of these,
which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, and it's
so
something that I've always done.
One of the things that
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay.
Okay, okay, please.
One of the things that we struggle with, or I struggle with being a poet, is the whole concept of line breaks and how to slow people's reading down, because I'm of the opinion that poetry is often read too quickly, because we use different reading muscles when we're reading fiction or when we're reading prose, maybe. And the slow, I believe the slow read. And so sometimes what I do with students is I dictate poems to them a line at a time, poems that they don't yet know, or even poems that they do know. And I ask them, what do you think comes next and why? You know, what decisions did the poet make? And it kind of gives us, it sweetens the surprise of the language. And that's what I feel like your sculptors are doing as well, just kind of sweetening the surprise. And yeah, amazing.
I mean, but at the same time, I mean, like I've really understood for myself that that almost all of the art that I create, that I can stand by, it operates on the concrete level that you have in front of you, but there is also a meta level happening around you. And what I was really doing with these things is, I realized through the course of all of these books I've been creating, that essentially I am taking kind of the normal white page with black print simply printed upon it as being a kind of bastion of normalcy, a bastion of heteronormativity, quite specifically, and simply saying, the way that you give me to present myself doesn't work for me, it's not enough. So these are all ways of like, how can I actually express myself more truly, fundamentally with these means, with the tools that we are given by the society that we grow up in, by patriarchy, by heteronormativity. How can I use these tools that you're giving me, but in a way that represents myself? I mean, so I've been doing this with language. There's been a massive simplification of the language that I use. Like I've gotten into much more short form things, because I need to be able to own all of the connotations of what it is that I'm saying. And at the same time, I really need to control the framing of my expressions as well, because ultimately, for me to be understood and appreciated, people need to take a step outside of their normal heteronormative ways of assigning value, of ways of assigning beauty, and so I need to. If I only allow myself to exist on their terms, then nobody has the chance to see me, and I don't have the chance to be seen for who I am. And so like, through all of these different things, because ultimately it's 5-6 books ultimately, and they all meditate differently in different ways on how you can use or abuse the concept of book to convey an extra level of thought of saying, you can do things differently. We're not limited to a book simply being black and white, page after page. We're not limited to this way of accepting somebody else's experience. Yeah.
So you're kind of really forcing people to critically reflect on what it means to read and to use language, right? So we take it for granted sometimes, and we read way too fast, and we become very impatient, and you're really forcing everyone to slow down. And I wonder whether experiencing this pandemic had something to do with your creative process that allowed you to start conceiving these books.
I mean, absolutely. Essentially, the more I understand, especially having gone through a second lockdown and essentially done exactly the same thing again, but thought I was doing better. Both times, like what kind of happened is, simultaneously, it gave me the time and space to do things really intensely and meticulously in a way that I normally would just not have the time. It's not often that I find 400 hours to make a book. You know, like normally that would be 6 months worth of work, 10 months worth of work. I don't know, it would have been a hell of a lot of work. It wouldn't normally be able to happen in such a short space of time, because I would normally be going out. I'd be going out clubbing, I'd be going out gigging, I'd just be hanging out with friends. And so by virtue of not having these things in place where I get my validation, I realized that like going on stage, for example, it's one of the only places where I can allow myself to turn off all of my social filters, because when I'm on stage, I know it's all allowed to be about me. I know that we've consented, everybody in this room has consented to a situation where they're going to shut the fuck up and I'm going to do what I do and they're going to appreciate it, you know, like, and that's something that I really struggled in many ways to kind of consciously take up space, or like I'm like, the nature of my trauma means that I'm constantly in hypervigilance. I'm constantly scanning situations to make sure it's okay, to make sure everything's okay. And gigging is one of the places where I just don't have to do that at all. And so not having that, and then at the same time, not having the ability to go out and share my experience, you know, especially like I'd be getting much more back into poetry. I mean, I only started doing poetry again in August 2019. I took like a 10-year hiatus, but that was really gathering pace, and I was doing lots of readings, and then also going out clubbing, going out to Kit Kat, getting really glammed up, going out as my best self, and having people appreciate it. These are all massive points of validation, and I hadn't realized how essential they had become for my self-worth. And so to all of a sudden have that be completely disconnected, and yet at the same time having all of this time and space to be able to essentially dissociate into doing art, which is what I realized that I kind of do, that I go into a dissociative processing space where my conscious mind kind of turns off and I just do things, and then essentially when they're finished I realize, oh, that's what I was trying to say, that's what I needed to tell myself, you know. So that's exactly like with the Dream World book. I was just processing in real time and not thinking about it, and then I come back to it and I read it through and go, oh wow, this is like a whole thing that's telling me that I've really had to experiment with language, because I need language to no longer hurt me, because language cannot be disentangled from the society in which we live, you know. I actually have a poem about that, which is in this series. So it says, gender is violence, language is its bludgeon, mate, so fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
But yeah, but having these realizations that, I mean, I hardly speak German anymore. I speak fluent German, and I've loved speaking German, and I hardly speak it at all anymore, because it's impossible to talk about myself and or the people I care about without invoking gender.
Yes.
You know, and so like,
I've just been talking with Claude about this actually, because it's an issue for them as well. And apparently some of Claude's friends who are German speakers have started using they, them, like using the English word.
Yeah.
So they
really
pepper it throrow their German. They just, you know, they're common, you know, or they schwimmen or whatever, you know. Yeah. So that's an interesting development, and I, you know, that's one possible pathway. But yeah.
It's a language in which everything is gendered, right?
Yeah.
Like,
not just the people. Yeah.
People. Yeah. It's quite excessive. And
I mean, like I can't state someone's relationship to me without invoking gender. I mean, I to say this is a friend of mine, the only way I can say it without invoking gender is saying, das hier ist ein mir befreundeten Mensch. And you have to do so many somersaults linguistically to be able to be true to yourself. And all language is the same. I mean, all language comes with really specific connotations. I think that the English, through a lot of points in its development, has meant that it's a much more fundamentally simplistic and porous language, which means that we have things like the singular second person. Is that right? Or is it third person? Yes. Third person.
So
like to say they.
Singular, third person singular.
Yeah, like third person singular. We actually have that in place, and we do use it. I have another poem that deals with this quite nicely, actually, which I'm really happy with.
Go on.
So it's one poem, but like the first part isn't animated. So it says, when our fundamental truths don't allow for much, we settle for very little. Fuck 'em, rewrite 'em, have sex. Fuck that, get a new copywriter, have sex with them. If they're down, they there, them there, hashtag gender neutral pronouns aren't that hard, right?
Amen, or amen to that.
Yeah. And the thing that I love about this poem, the book is literally breaking. The thing that I like about it is that ultimately to a neutral audience, I'm extending a mercy exclusively to the cis, het, straight men who might read it, because the way that they would probably view me is they're probably going to assume that I like men, and therefore me talking about having sex with someone, I'm probably going to talk about having sex with a man. They're going to expect me to say, get a new copywriter, have sex with him, but I don't. I say have sex with them so that they don't have to go through the discomfort of momentarily being prompted to imagine having sex with a man. And so there is a relief in me using gender neutral language that concretely benefits someone who is cis hetero. And then I tell them, actually, this poem is not about this. You've read everything in this direction. This has moved in this direction. And now actually, we're going to do a complete 90 degrees tangent and say, yeah, like gender neutral pronouns really aren't that hard, you know?
And you literally do a 90 degrees.
Yeah. Like
it starts there and then it's there. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know how I come up with this shit. I mean, I take drugs and make poems. That's pretty much what I do.
And you write your poems on your phone sometimes.
Since December 2019, I write exclusively in Google Docs. Like either on my phone or on my computer. I found like the workflow is wonderful because it means that I can quickly sketch something down while I'm out and about. But then when I come home, I can play around on the computer, and I don't have to go back looking for things and then rewrite them the way that I used to when I was writing in a physical notebook. And there's something just really refreshing about being able to literally, when I scroll back through what my notes have been, I can literally pick up where my thought last left off. You know, so I don't have to concretely take something and copy it and then work on it or go through the process of typing it up, because it's always just right there. And so
when you say when you do that, these books that you produce are then seriously handworked as well, right? Or these sculptures. So do you also publish in other ways?
That's something that I'm struggling with at the moment. I don't really know how to get these things out there in any real way, because I mean, I can video them and people can see videos, but that's not a way to necessarily publish them. I am currently experiencing how complex it is, because like this book, Pretty Fucking Magic, I made completely by hand. Like I cut every single thing by hand. And in the meantime, I now have a plotter cutter, which means that I can actually, I have a machine that prints and cuts everything for me, and all I have to do is stick it together, which really massively reduces the production time. but it's still hundreds of hours of work to actually get a single thing made. In any real sense, a publishing of these things under normal context isn't possible, which makes sense because literally the thing that I am rejecting in whatever I'm making at the moment is the concept of simply a book being white paper with black print. Like, that's
Exactly.
the thing that I'm rejecting most vehemently with everything that I've been creating, you know? But it does mean that it's no way near as easy to publish in any way.
They can be exhibited as art objects, right? And I look at
yes.
them, and to me, they're artist books, you know, and that's its own genre, and that can create a lot of different exhibition alternatives for you.
Well, this is the best way so far. Like, I have a solo exhibition coming up in April, but I actually had an exhibition last summer. It was all quite unexpected. Like, I'd been working on this book, Pretty Fucking Magic, and then had a breakdown and documented and created, like, I had a breakdown via making poetry. Like, I'm not going to show all of it to you, but this is called Red, White, and it's a book, and the binding is the box, and actually every page is made of cellophane. It's all laminated. This is not the right lighting situation for this at all, because like it's supposed to be backlit.
Oh, wow.
You see this page says "I fucking hate men" over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then there's one that's been cut out, and there's this little red heart. And like, how does that look? It's very difficult to show this.
We can see it. We can see it.
Yeah.
Like when you have the light behind it, we can actually read it.
But so I'm not gonna show all that to you right now, because it really is a big heavy work, because it was literally, I had a complete the best nervous breakdown I've ever had. And like I say, it has all of these different pages put together, like where there's lots of thicknesses of layers, and but I did that, and essentially a lot of what crops up in there came from the fact that during lockdown, obviously I didn't see anyone from the outside world. I didn't go out into the outside world almost at all. And I had to help my partner move. And it was the first day I'd really been out in public. And upon parking outside of my house to pick stuff up, 3 cars after another had a bunch of young men in it, and they all shouted shitty comments at me. And that evening, I was hanging out in my bedroom / studio, basically making poetry, but I came up with this, which says lubricane. And in fine print, it says desensitizing lubricant, 7% lidocaine, now condom friendly. Please wash your hands. And inside, you might be able to see. Yeah, you can see it really well. It's lidocaine infused lube. So it's a desensitizing lubricant, but each of the individual letters of "I fucking hate men" are printed on acetate and are separate. So it's kind of a generative poem, because if you shake it up, then the letters will line up in a different way and you will see them differently.
Wow.
And I kind of made that and thought, oh, wow, that's fun. And didn't really think about it again. And then, then I, at some point, came up with another couple of ideas. I came up with the concept for these, which are called bitter pills. The exhibition I did was called Bitter Pills and Poetry, where I exhibited all of my books, but then I had these pieces where essentially they all, so you see this is this is like medication, and the entire packaging is done like medication. So it's like 5 capsules or 5G capsules. And then on the side, it says, for use by anyone negatively impacted by patriarchy, single capsule to be swallowed whole, digestion may take time and require you to do the work. Please read the info sheet before voicing your opinion. On the other side, it says, warning, may be hard to swallow. Side effects may include unjustified rage, insights into experiences that are not your own, the growing awareness that you may be part of the problem. Should you experience side effects, please do not expect the non-men in your life to do your emotional labor. And inside, when you open it up, there is an info sheet, and there is a little bottle with a single pill inside it. And inside the pill, let's see if we can see it, it reads, there is on a piece of acetate, I fucking hate men. And again, the red anatomically correct heart.
Oh.
And then essentially on the info sheet, that is my trans manifesto. And so there's a really kind of weird symbiotic feedback loop that happened in all of this, because I was creating these pieces of art that all say I fucking hate men. They are all in direct response to experiencing transphobic aggression or violence. They include things like toilet paper. And
with the little heart, I see the little heart.
Yeah, it's always with the little heart. And then there is some drug paraphernalia, so a crushing card and a razor blade that both say I fucking hate men. And yeah, essentially like the see-through book, Red, White, and I realized like the last page of that is the first, well, I say the first writing. I mean, it is my trans manifesto. And essentially, I found myself having to do a lot of understanding about what forgiveness is, first and foremost. Living with people so intensely, living with my partner unexpectedly was really intense. And we both have a lot of issues that we're both really good at dealing with. We have a fantastic relationship, and it's too big for cohabitation. And so we had to unpack a lot. And so me processing all of this stuff, literally with a laminator, acetate, a printer, and lots of drugs. I mean, there are physically drugs in the book. I mean, they
Nice.
ketamine infused snot that has been laminated into the page I was working on. There's like, there's a hit of acid in there. There's a bag of speed. There's MDMA. There's like literally
expensive book. Will this be an expensive book?
But you know, like
costs, you know.
Yeah.
Werden kosten.
Yeah, it's and essentially, I don't know, that I was just processing in real time, and Cecile and I, my partner, we had a couple of weeks off from each other when she found a new place, and then we met again, and we just had these really amazing, frank, honest conversations. And I realized that a lot of my work over the years has been obsessed with the concept of intent and understanding intent. And I realized that it's because understanding intent is the foundation for forgiveness. Like we are born into fundamentally, essentially toxic family structures within a very toxic societal structure. We can't not have toxic behaviors. And so to understand when we ourselves or somebody that we love is exhibiting toxic behavior, the way that you can get over that is first and foremost by being prepared to hear, by being prepared to listen, to be called out, and being prepared to change. But the only way that you can change is by understanding exactly what happened and why. And so forgiveness for me is inextricably linked to intent and understanding intent, you know? And I found that we'd had this really wonderful conversation. I wrote an entire book in 14 hours in her bed with her while she slept, which was me processing stuff as well. And I woke up essentially the morning after and realized I'd been really struggling with the idea of telling my dad, explaining to my dad how and why I can completely justifiably have an or make art. I had no idea about an exhibition then, but how I can make art that says I fucking hate men. And so I literally grabbed my computer and started to write a letter to my dad. And 45 minutes later, I'd written my trans manifesto, which was just like a single train of thought, which I think you can feel from it as well. But then afterwards, I literally, it was just one single train of thought.
It's amazing. I mean, I've read it, and I just want to pay tribute to the ways that you have foregrounded both the violence and the forgiveness in that piece. I don't know how you've done it even. I couldn't even point to it and say how you've done it. I don't know if I could. It would take me a long time to write a review of a piece like that. It would take me days and days. And so, but one of the things that stayed with me is, many things have stayed with me. The image of God, you know, reducing back into one all abusing single entity that somehow, you know, because only one of them is available to impregnate Mary, then suddenly she gets off the hook of being a slut or being a whore. I mean, that's, it's clear you're a visual artist as well. But also this phrase, penetrator's privilege. If you would talk a little bit about that, or actually about anything you want, because I'm really quite happy just listening to you, to be honest. That phrase, penetrator's privilege, is I've never read that before, I've never heard of it before, and I'd love you to unpack it a little bit for us if you feel like it.
I think, I mean, it's really strange. Like I said, this book, Red, White, and is all the sketches and work that I needed to do to be able to write this. And so I know what things I was playing with and wasn't able to express before it clicked. I think specifically, like the reason why I talk about penetrator's privilege in that context is acknowledging the space within patriarchy that has managed to be made for gay men, and the assumption that so long as they are passing, if they're passing, then they are probably going to be the penetrator, which means they're not really a fag. You know, like literally, I read a thing, just a meme just today about the fact that Julius Caesar had a gay relationship with somebody, but that wasn't a problem. The problem was that he was the bottom. That's why he got ridiculed, you know? And it really is inextricably linked to the entire psyche of man within patriarchy is all cock imagery. Like if you look at what the ultimate end goal of patriarchy is for a man, is that he stands strong and alone. He's the only one to stand up strong. I mean, you can't, like, I know that is willfully weighted language, and yet when you listen to men talking about what it is that makes a man a real man, they can't help but use language that is ultimately very phallic. And it is, and there is this fundamental part of patriarchy, which is where capitalism becomes the expression of patriarchy in economic form, where you have to assume that one person is entitled to have power over the other, and it is all essentially comes down to the power to penetrate. And I don't know, there's a lot, I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about the way things end up lining up, and how things have kind of come to this point, and you know, I guess there is some evolutionary biological sense to how we've ended up here, but we certainly don't need to be here any longer, you know,
time's up now.
Yeah. Time's up, exactly. It's really weird, I had a really a really important set of experiences with my housemate. They're an absolutely wonderful being, just one of my favorite beings in the world. And they're like 24, they're queer as fuck, they're non-binary, they've been out as lesbians since they were like 14, and we're definitely of a different generation. And we were having a movie night at the beginning of lockdown 2, and I put on what had been my favorite film for years, which is The Hudsucker Proxy by the Coen brothers. No one's ever seen it. No one's ever heard of it. It is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. It's Tim Robbins and Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
And it's all about like this idiot who becomes the proxy for a huge big corporation so they can mess with their share value, and he actually ends up knowing what to do. Is the long and short of it. It's a really endearing story, and it doesn't even get past the B of the Bechdel test. There's only one woman in the whole thing who has a name. Like that's it. And don't get me wrong, it's about 1950s, 1960s corporate world, and corporate world from low-level blue-collar workers right the way up to the top. And that was dominated by men. There weren't women in the workplace and stuff, but still. But like at some point, the sound quality wasn't so good and we stopped watching it. And then Juna said, yeah, there was just way too much men in there anyway. And it really hurt. It really hurt because this film, like, it's absolutely wonderful storytelling. It's a beautiful story, beautifully told. And it doesn't have any women in it. And I found that really hard to reconcile. Yeah, my housemate, they're a film student. I was like, how can you not? You need to see this because it's such amazing storytelling. And these are all the things going on in my head. And at some point, I just did also have to acknowledge and do more and more for myself. Do any of us need to hear another story that a straight white man has got to say? And the answer simply is no. And if they've got anything better to offer than they have been doing, because let's face it, the shit they've been putting out is not okay. You know, it glorifies violence. It glorifies all of the toxic shit that all of us queers are having to spend our lives deprogramming and working out how to do things differently, how to actually have healthy relationships with clear communication. It's all these manifestations of really toxic behavior that they don't do the work of saying, hey, this is toxic, let's do things differently. They say, hey, this is toxic, please blow me for having an enlightenment. You know, it's just too much. And it's just like, if you have got something that's worthwhile saying, sorry, but guys, you've had your fucking chance. You know, the fact is that cis, white, straight men with enough privilege to have access to this kind of storytelling, they are such a minority within our community, within our society. They are as much a minority as women, as anyone. Actually, it's such a small minority, and yet they've had such this exclusive monopoly on the stories that we hear. And like, we need stories. We as human beings, we need stories, and we need stories to help us manage social situations with the people around us. That's what we need. If we were still in our tribal mode, then people would tell stories so that we have the information that you need to learn how to engage in your environment. You need to know what happens when you have that crazy storm that grandma still remembers. You know, like these are why we need stories, and we have them to extrapolate truths of our existence from. And yet the stories that we have been given, pumped in for the last 80 years are all defined by rich, straight, white, cis men.
I mean, some of us have the good fortune of having some other stories, literally tribal stories, and yet for someone like me, who, you know, I've whakapapa back to 4 different tribes, Maori tribes, and then you know, also, and I'm also English and German, and yet none of those tribal stories are what I see when I start up any screen. None of those tribal stories are what I see writ large in my world, you know. And so I guess we're creating our own tribes, and the tribes are saying, fuck this, you know, enough now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's such, like, I understand and feel sorry for these people who end up appropriating or misappropriating traditional tribal cultures as they still exist. I think it just goes to show how pervasive the tools of patriarchy and capitalism really are, is that we only really understand how to commodify something. So there is this genuine, deep void in Western human existence right now. There is an absolute lack of spirituality, because the only spirituality that has been made available to us is the most violent tool of patriarchy in managing our moral landscapes and our moral interactions. And
believe me, I mean, this is so, oh man, this is why it's so relevant to all the research that I'm doing too, is that, you know, QAnon, for example, and the what's happened on Capitol Hill, and the fact that that guy with the horns calls himself a shaman, and you know, he's a hair's breadth away from doing a haka. I can just feel it.
Yeah.
So all of this is just fuck. Yeah.
And yet, I don't know. I mean, we need spirituality, but like, I watched a documentary or 2 documentaries about ayahuasca recently, and it's like, okay, I really do understand how and why these people are doing this. I do believe that the psychedelic experience is essential to so much trauma healing. It has been for me. And I do believe that these experiences are essential. And yet the idea of, for the sake of my white ass needing to go through some kind of healing, completely misappropriating a traditional ritual and bastardizing it, just tainting it. I mean, it's an awful thing. And yet we do have our own things, you know. I mean, like, Western society has created its own psychedelics. You know, we have LSD, we have 2CB, we have DMT, we have these like synthetic things, and we don't need to go and violate other people's cultures. What we need, because what those things do, the whole process of these psychedelic rituals is so that people can be more at one with their environment and their society and their surroundings. And we have the capacity to do that. You know, we do have the capacity to actually have these experiences without unapologetically raping people's cultures who we have already raped to the point of non-existence in most cases.
Yeah, in some cases,
you know.
yeah.
But I think, please.
Yeah, no, I was thinking you're talking about storytelling and healing and therapeutic experiences, and I was thinking, what stories or storytellers have been crucial for you in your own healing, in your own creative process, in your own life?
Okay, honestly, and I know this has like the potential to sound really vain, the only person the only art that I've come across that makes sense and tells stories I need it to tell is the stuff that I make.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally a case of I'm creating the stuff that I wish that I'd had. You know, Pretty Fucking Magic, this book, that is the book that I needed as a teenager. It needed to honor the kind of playful ideas that I have and talk about the things that I need to have talked about, you know, like, because I don't know of anybody else telling these kind of stories. And it is because we're all so idiosyncratic. I mean, this is one of the things, especially about trans identity, is that while we have this umbrella thing that holds us all together as being trans, our actual lived experiences are so diverse that essentially you have to be constantly stepping into a meta understanding to be able to actually understand how and why each other's experiences do make sense for each other and are things that we can learn from. Somebody who, like my partner has experienced a lot of childhood developmental trauma in a very specific way within her family, and that has affected her in very specific ways. My developmental trauma is not through parental abuse. It's generally through my parents not really knowing how to deal with big emotions because they weren't given those tools, and then being subjected to some not pretty awful violence. So I experienced 4 years of some of the most awful violence I have ever been aware of for anyone that I know. And so we have these very distinctly different experiences, these very distinctly different traumatic experiences. And if we take it on face value, then we can't really offer each other any help or support with each other's stories. And you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, this affects you like that, because of that. This affects me because of this and this and this, but the structure is still the same. You know, and it's only through having to take a step back and understand what the deeper lying stories are that we're telling, that I can actually extrapolate from other people's experience and the stories that I receive. Yeah, it's only through extrapolation that I can actually have things that I feel really resonate for myself.
Yeah. And that brings us back to language as well. You know, that the sharing of language, how important that is, given that is the main vehicle through which one-to-one at least tell stories. Can you identify, just out of my interest, can you identify how, for you as an artist, how language sits alongside these other expressions or inside these other expressions? Like, for example, you're a musician, you play several instruments, you're a performer, even without saying anything. You know, if we think of the wider expression of performance, especially, you know, good old Judith's gender as performance, how do you balance language with the other ways that you are and be an artist?
I think it is the absolute foundation. Okay. Like with the other kind of musical performances that I do, like the two main music projects I have at the moment is Gorjeoux and the Corsets, where I do all of these mashups. And I sent you a link just before we started the show that you can have a listen to, where I apply this whole concept of appropriation and making it suit me, just simply to culture and songs and stories that we have around us. Like, because for me, songs come into the same category as storytelling. We need our songs. We need the songs of our tribe. We need our anthems, essentially, to take it onto a larger level. But we do have these songs because they are also somehow storytelling, and they're pulling us together so that we experience the same thing at the same time. And so with Gorjeoux and the Corsets, I mash up songs in ways that really make sense, so that one song will be an answer to another song, or will be a willful contradiction of another song, but it's all about the lyrics. I mean, ultimately, these are all about the lyrics. I change lyrics to suit my needs wherever I need them, because why the fuck should I respect some like white-ass straight songwriter who wrote a song about love? Why should I respect that when he blatantly doesn't respect me? This is just simply the raw material that's around me. I'm allowed to take these things and put them together to suit my own needs. And then the other project I have is called Blue Moon with my partner, where we do really tender, beautiful reimaginings of romantic pop songs, but where again we rewrite lyrics to make them make sense. You know, so even though it's a musical performance, it's still very much about this fundamental idea of language and the fact that we don't have to be slaves to expectations. We don't have to be slaves to the norm. We don't have to take this song that is fundamentally problematic, even though it's a cool song. We don't have to accept that it's problematic. You know, we can say it's a really cool song. We can make it not problematic, and then it's a really cool song that's not problematic. Cool, you know. Yeah. So I mean, with my other outlets, that's still very much what I work with. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are using up like all of your evening.
Yeah.
I've got to do that, but I just. Yeah.
Do you want to share some of your music? Is that possible to do from your apartment, from where you are, or is that?
I mean, I've been. It's really crazy. I've been in both lockdowns. Essentially, I just stopped doing music. Like, literally, I tried to play guitar 2 days ago and realized that I have not had so little calluses, I think, in the last 10 years. Like it just hurt to play an acoustic guitar. But like, yeah, like my partner and I are planning on doing some Blue Moon recordings and videos sometime soon, because that's really nice. Like, but yeah, I mean, especially like Gorjeoux. I mean, she lives on stage. And if she's not doing it on stage in front of people, it's just not the same. Like,
I get it. Yeah. I mean, we'll also share the links, any links that you want us to share when we publish, when we broadcast this episode. So
we'll have our show notes. So we can put a lot of material there.
Yeah, that'd be really lush. Yeah.
Is there anything else that that you would like to ask Sophia, or Moon? You can also ask anything that you want us to chat, you know.
Sure. I was actually wondering about community, because I know that community has been essential for you, because I've heard you talk about different communities that have been important for your healing, for your social life. And I was wondering about community in terms of storytelling and language, and how a lot of communities we tell each other stories, right? We give each other that kind of information that you were talking about, like the grandmother who talks about the legend of the storm that really happened, and conveys important information in that way. And I wonder whether you'd like to talk a little bit about that, the kinds of communities that are available specifically in Berlin and maybe in other places you've experienced that allow us to heal together.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's been very distinct steps in my finding of community that very much started with Kit Kat, which was kind of in many ways an odd place for me to start, but it was the place that I started. And essentially what that space gave me, what that community gave me, is it gave me the opportunity to be in a space where, especially when it comes to sexual boundaries, that it's going to be respected in a way that isn't normally. And that there is allowed to be a discussion around sexuality. There's a tolerance and an acceptance and a lack of judgment of sexuality just as the baseline. And that was really essential to me for a long time, because a lot of my trauma is intersected with or born of sexual and sexualized trauma. And I mean, essentially for almost 7-8 months in 2019, I basically went to Kit Kat, got high, hung out by the pool, and had incredibly deep, honest, open conversations with people, with anyone. I mean, literally, I spent one time in there. I was there for about 17 hours. I worked out that for 16 of those hours, I'd been on one of 2 mattresses next to the pool, and I'd had conversations with, I think, 5 or 6 people. And but each time 2 or 3 hours, you know, there's some of these really in-depth conversations, and just having a space in which that could happen, where, because everybody's on a similar level, everyone's open for having a nice time, you know, people are taking similar drugs, people are on a similar wavelength. That was really, like, I don't think there's anything that I could have gotten from anywhere else that could have even remotely given me that healing space.
And it's quite a magical space as well. Like,
yeah.
I remember it very well, that pool, the light, there's just something going on there that is healing in and of itself.
Yeah. And so like that was essential. And then towards the end of 2019, I'd started getting more and more into writing poetry, and then started performing again. And then actually over the end of 2019 to the beginning, until lockdown, essentially, I wasn't going out clubbing that much, but that's because like I'd actually started going to like Berlin Spoken Word, especially, which is a really wonderful spoken word open mic. But like Mary and Aniso, who run it, are really great. Mary's fantastic because she's just this really upfront, incredibly open about all of her, just herself. Like, she's a really amazing lesbian who is completely unapologetic for any of her existence. And that just creates this space in which anything goes and anything will be respected. And that was really, that has been a really important community for me as well. Like, because there's a definite queerness to a lot of the people that I now know through that. But just in general, I think like the biggest thing for me has just been for myself. I've just taken this decision that I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to talk about myself. I'm not going to be embarrassed about myself. I'm not going to be ashamed about what it is that I do and how I do it and why I do it. Because so much that is crippling about trauma, full stop. But that specifically one of the traumatic tools of the society in which we live is the idea of shame. There is just so much shame involved, and and the mechanism of shame means that we're carrying around pain that we're not allowed to find any resolution for, because we're not allowed to have it seen, which means we're not allowed to compare it. We're not allowed to see, okay, this is pretty bad, but it's possible to do things differently, you know. And for me, like, it's very much about these personal exchanges of story and of who we are, you know. So like for me, I very much took the decision that I am going to just talk freely and openly, and if that bothers somebody, that's okay. If somebody doesn't want to be my friend because I talk way too much about really deep things, challenging things, then okay. I don't need them to be my friend. If that's not something that they want or need from a friendship, then I don't need that, you know? And that's been like, I think that kind of informs more and more my approach to stories. Is I want to hear authentic stories about things that matter, you know. And this is the point about, like, you know, do I need to hear another song by a straight beardy man? No, I don't. I just don't. Like, it's like, you had an emotion, fantastic. You don't, you know, like. And I know it sounds really hard and cynical, and I am occasionally pleasantly surprised by a few cis hetero men. I'm actually very close to a couple, but not many, and they're the ones that have done the work. I mean, I think ultimately, like, the whole point of my I fucking hate men pieces is it's a litmus test. If you're a man, or not even if you're a man, if you are fundamentally bothered by me saying I fucking hate men, then you have work to do, you know? And for men very specifically, if you're offended, I mean you. And it is that simple, you know? If you go, then I mean I fucking hate men and you're one of them. And if you go, fair, then it's just like, okay, I don't mean you. Like, yeah, and it is that simple. And the whole concept of the exhibition was that there are these art pieces, these absurdist art pieces, and it's important that they are absurdist. And they are absurdist for me because there isn't anything with which we can engage with. There is no material object with which we can engage with that is not precipitated exclusively from the actions and values of patriarchy. There is nothing, whether it's a glass, whether it's a cup, whether it's a fucking sewing machine, whether it's anything, there is nothing that we can touch that is not exclusively the result of patriarchy. And that's absurd. And so it's equally absurd for me to put anti-patriarchal things on anything. And ultimately, each of the individual things is always a prompt to come back to the Trans Manifesto, because the Trans Manifesto explains, as best as I can, why I make pieces called I fucking hate men. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
We totally skipped over the bit at the beginning where we introduced ourselves. And so we can do that. We can do that now.
Never, because I would not.
Fantastic.
Details.
So I'm Henny Moina Baker for people who are tuning in who haven't watched Mouth Noise before, and no Aotearoa ahau, he Māori, he Pākehā hoki. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and my dad is Māori and my mum is from Germany and England and Australia. My languages are English and Māori and German, a little bit of German, getting there with the German. And I also identify as takatapui, which is the Māori word for, I guess the closest translation is queer. And my pronouns are she, her. And we have been absolutely delighted, are absolutely delighted to have been talking with gorgeous Moon, who is gorgeous today. From Berlin, I'm in Berlin, and we're all in Berlin today. Yeah, over to you, Moon.
Yeah, I'm Gorgeous Moon, which means I'm Moon and I'm gorgeous. And yeah, I guess I'm a radical trans feminist art maker person. And yeah, I'm from the UK originally, but I've been here for a long time. I am evidently queer as fuck. I am a non-binary trans femme, which is to say that my pronouns are she and they, depending on who you're speaking to. Yeah, I do lots of stuff. I make books, I make book-shaped poetry sculptures, I perform poetry, I perform songs, I do mashups, I do lots of fun stuff. It's great.
Yes, you do. And do I have to introduce myself as well? I'm confused. I'm lost now. I got lost.
You totally don't have to. You don't have to.
Okay. This is for us to put at the beginning of the episode, right? We're gonna
could be just to give us
or not. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm Sophia. I'm a writer living in Berlin. I've been living here since 2013, which seems like a really long time now. And I grew up between Lisbon and London, and then I lived in New York, and I lived in Sydney and Perth in Australia, and I call Berlin home now, mostly home. And yes, and now I'm doing Mouth Noise with in Moana, and collaborating with you, Moon, as well. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this beautiful conversation dance.
Thank you so much, Moon. Yeah.
Now they're dances we have with our guests.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Right. Really, really happy to have done this. This is awesome. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for inviting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you were the first that we wanted to talk to. So yeah, thank you so much for making the time and for being your incredible and authentic and real self for us and for anyone who's watching and listening. What a privilege, what a fucking privilege, and what an honor. And yeah, I'm mihi tiu kei te mihi kia koe te tuahine, e te tuakana. Thank you so much for being part of our Mouth Noise family today and also in an ongoing way. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
We love you. We'll talk soon. We'll talk soon, Moon.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Tschüssi.
I don't know if you recognize this shape here.
Oh my God, it's like a pregnancy test.
It's a negative pregnancy test.
Yeah, only those of us who've had like sexual intercourse with those with penises
Yes.
understand that. But I'm one of them.